If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-sized understanding. When you look out, a golf ball-sized awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-sized wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter.
She said it's really not my habit to intrude. Furthermore, I hope my meaning won't get lost or misconstrued, but I'll repeat myself at the risk of being crude. There must be 50 ways to leave your lover, 50 ways to leave your lover. You just slip out the back, Jack. You make a new plan, Stan. No need to be coy, Roy. Oh, you just get yourself free. You hop on the bus, cause there's no need to discuss much. Just drop off your keyless. Oh, and you get yourself free.
Every time you learn a new fact or skill, you change your brain. It's something we call neuroplasticity. So as little as 25 years ago, we thought that after about puberty, the only changes that took place in the brain were negative. The loss of brain cells with aging, the result of damage, like a stroke. And then studies began to show remarkable amounts of reorganization in the adult brain. And the ensuing research has shown us that all of our behaviors change our brain, that these changes are not limited by age. It's good news, right? And in fact, they're taking place all the time. The key to each of these changes is neuroplasticity. So what does it look like? So your brain can change in three very basic ways to support learning. And the first is chemical. So your brain actually functions by transferring chemical signals between brain cells, what we call neurons, and these trigger a series of actions and reactions. So to support learning, your brain can increase the amount or the concentrations of these chemical signaling that's taking place between neurons. Now, because this kind of change can happen very rapidly, this supports short-term memory, or the short-term improvement in the performance of a motor skill. The second way that the brain can change to support learning is by altering its structure. So during learning, the brain can change the connections between neurons. Now here, the physical structure of the brain is actually changing, so this takes a bit more time. These types of changes are related to long-term memory, the long-term improvement in a motor skill. Now, these processes, they interact. Structural changes also can lead to integrated networks of brain regions that function together to support learning. And they can also lead to certain brain regions that are important for very specific behaviors to change their structure or to enlarge. And so here's some examples of that. So people who read Braille, they have larger hand sensory areas in their brain than those of us who don't. Your dominant hand motor region, which is on the left side of your brain, if you're right-handed, is larger than the other side. And research shows that London taxi cab drivers who actually have to memorize a map of London to get their taxi cab license, they have larger brain regions devoted to spatial or mapping memories. Now, the last way that your brain can change to support learning is by altering its function. As you use a brain region, it becomes more and more excitable and easy to use again. And as your brain has these areas that increase their excitability, the brain shifts how and when they're activated. With learning, we see that whole networks of brain activity are shifting and changing. Behaviors that you employ in your everyday life are important. Each of them is changing your brain.
So many people think meditation is something which is very difficult, so empty mind, don't think of anything, concentration, like that, you know. So that is the misunderstanding about the meditation. So actually, meditation, you don't have to do anything like block the thought or create special state of mind, peace, calm, no need. Just simply be. So as long as if you're aware of something and then maintain that awareness, that is the meditation.
Creativity is our ability to look at a problem and come up with a good solution to solve it. Once we understand this, we realize that it has nothing to do with the subject matter, job, or what we study. There are creative inventors and creative artists, but there are also very creative cleaners and highly creative teachers. People we worship for their creativity often just connect different ideas in a beautiful new way and make them commercially successful.
Meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. From the town of Bedrock, they're a page right out of his story. Let's ride with the family down the street, through the courtesy of Fritz and Pete. When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba-dabba-doo time, a dabba-doo time, we'll have a gay old time.
I'd like to begin with a personal story. When my son Max was 6 years old, he expressed an interest in learning how to shoot pool. It's kind of interesting for a 6-year-old desire to have, but we looked around and it turns out around the corner from where I live in Manhattan, there's a pool hall. So I call up the pool hall and speak to the owners of the company, and they said, yeah, we give lessons, and we give lessons to kids. And it turns out the person that gives lessons to the kids is one of the top 10 players in the country. It was an amazing experience for my son. And every day or twice a week, we'd walk up to the pool hall. And one day, when he was about 7 years old, he stopped me and he said, hey, Dad, what happens when you and Mom die? Now, you can imagine what I'm starting to think. I mean, I'm starting to think, you know, is he having an inkling about heaven? Is this something he learned about or saw something in school? Did he watch something on TV that traumatized him? You know, I had hundreds of assumptions bombarding my head because what I was most concerned about was getting that right answer, because if I didn't get the right answer, I'd mess him up for life. So it dawned on me that I needed to ask him, why? And I turned and I said, Max, why are you asking me this question? And he said, well, Dad, I want to know when you and Mom die, do I get the apartment? Because I would like to put a pool table in the living room. I tell this story because I want to remind you about the assumption. The assumption has amazing powers. It can build walls or it can open doors. And the reality is, while most people think, well, I maybe make an assumption here and there, you really make assumptions hundreds of times a day. It's really a key element on how you make decisions. And as the world gets more complex, as the world gets busier, we become more and more dependent on those assumptions. Now, that's okay. But the trouble is that we treat those assumptions as truths rather than for what they are, which they are, their beliefs. And that gets us into all kinds of trouble. For example, you judge people before you actually get to know them. In business, how many times you think there is only one way to really do this? Or perhaps you make assumptions and you're already thinking of the answer before you really truly understand what the question is all about, such as what happened with my son Max. You see, this happens in the subconscious. We're not even aware that we're making those assumptions, but they have significant consequences to them. But what if you were to challenge that assumption? What if you were to acknowledge that assumption? What were you to bring it from the subconscious level to the conscious level, to acknowledge it, to raise your awareness of it? Then you have huge opportunities in front of you. You have huge opportunities. I call this making an assumption. You see, when you make an assumption, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the opportunity to consider that assumption, to suspend belief, to allow new ideas to open up and to come in. And that's the power of the assumption when you turn it into an assumption. It gives you opportunity, it gives you choices in which you can really minimize putting up those walls that stand in the way of you achieving what you want to achieve, and open the doors to allow you to find the solutions that did not exist before. So when you take an assumption and you register it, you turn it into assumption, you now have incredible power. One, you can blindly accept it as you would do an assumption subconsciously. Two, you can consider it, which then allows you to suspend belief for the new ideas to come in. And three, you can challenge it. And challenging it is the fastest way to generate a new idea or to see an opportunity that did not exist before. It's a process that works. Thank you very much for your time, and stay open.
Something occurred to me. I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep and haven't thought about you since. You know what occurred to me?
No.
You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about.
Why, thank you.
It's all right. You've never been out of Boston.
Nope.
So if I asked you about art, you'd probably give me the skinny on every art book ever written. Michelangelo. You know a lot about him. Life's work, political aspirations, him and the Pope, sexual orientation, the whole works, right? I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling. Seen that. If I ask you about women, you'd probably give me a syllabus of your personal favorites. You may have even been laid a few times. But you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy. You're a tough kid. I ask you about war, you probably throw Shakespeare at me, right? Once more into the breach, dear friends. But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend's head in your lap and watch him gasp his last breath looking to you for help. I ask you about love, you probably quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Known someone that could level you with her eyes. Feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you. Who could rescue you from the depths of hell. And you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel. To have that love for her, be there forever. Through anything. Through cancer. And you would know about sleeping sitting up in a hospital room for 2 months, holding her hand, because the doctors could see in your eyes that the terms visiting hours don't apply to you. You don't know about real loss, Because that only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself. I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much.
A while ago I stumbled upon this poem by Charles Bukowski on what it takes to be a writer.
If it doesn't come bursting out of you, in spite of everything, don't do it. Unless it comes unasked out of your heart and your mind and your mouth and your gut, don't do it. If you have to sit up for hours staring at your computer screen or hunched over your typewriter, searching for words, don't do it. If it's hard work, just thinking about doing it, don't do it. Unless it comes out of your soul like a rocket. Unless being still would drive you to madness or suicide or murder, don't do it. When it is truly time, if you have been chosen, it will do it by itself, and then it will keep on doing it until you die, or it dies in you. There is no other way. And there never was.
His message of course extends to other creative professions, from directing to composing music to painting or even sports. And although I think it's a beautiful poem and quite a romantic way of looking at creative endeavors, he is also horribly and fundamentally wrong. History is filled with creative geniuses where it didn't just came bursting out of them. Take some of our current super talent writers, for example. From Aaron Sorkin, who describes having a perpetual writer's block, to George R. Martin, who can't seem to finish his new book, to Tarantino, who has spoken about how difficult it is to be staring at an empty piece of paper where somehow his new movie needs to appear. And finally Robert McKee, writer of the Bible on screenwriting, who claims he is the biggest procrastinator in the world. I think for these creative minds, but also for you, me and many others, the more excited you are about your creative endeavor, the bigger the project and the more important to fulfilling your dreams, the harder it is to actually sit down and do it.
The trap that many writers, including myself, fall into mainly consists of staring motionless at a blank page. It's not that we don't want to write, or that we don't have the ability to put words down on the page. We just don't have any good ideas. It's not a fun place to be, believe me.
As Stephen Pressfield states, there is a secret that real writers know that wannabe writers don't. It is not the writing part that's hard. What's hard is sitting down to write. And he calls this force that keeps us from sitting down resistance. Resistance, according to Pressfield, is what stands between the life we live and our unlived life. It stands between us and our dreams of who we want to become and what we want to create. Are you a writer that doesn't write, a painter that doesn't paint, an entrepreneur that never starts a venture? Then you have fallen victim to resistance. Resistance is to be taken seriously, says Pressfield. It is to be declared evil. Millions have been defeated by it. Dreams have died because one gave up or never dared to start. It is therefore essential to learn to recognize resistance and learn how to beat it. Pressfield gives a beautiful description of resistance. He states that resistance is invisible and internal. We might think that it is friends, jobs, pets or the internet that keeps us from our creative work, but that's false.
I'm hungry. I should get coffee. Coffee would help me think. But I should write something first, then reward myself with coffee. Coffee and a muffin. Okay, so I need to establish the themes. Maybe banana nut. That's a good muffin.
The force of resistance that drives us to engage with these things and procrastinate comes from ourselves. Resistance is the self-generated enemy from within. Resistance is most commonly expressed in procrastination because it is the easiest to rationalize. I'll start, but I'll start tomorrow.
God, there was one week when you wore sweatpants. Every day.
You shall not pass!
Of course, Resistance' goal is to have us saying this until our deathbed. Pressfield describes that indulging is not always a manifestation of resistance, but if we feel hollow and unfulfilled afterwards, it probably was. We subconsciously know that we gave up our long-term goal for instant gratification. Resistance beat us.
You're out there sticking your dick in anything that moves, trying to get back at me, which is fine. Do you know what the worst thing is? You're not writing. You have this gift, you have this incredible talent, and you're just flushing it down the toilet.
Resistance expresses itself when you create drama in your life, claim victimhood, when you spend your time criticizing others, when you turn your life into a soap, or when you rationalize away why you haven't started yet. A working artist doesn't accept this kind of self-destructive behavior in his life because it prevents him from his work. Yet resistance can be helpful. Resistance points us to our true calling. It can be felt when we fear starting a creative project. This fear means that it is something that we need to do, something we have a deep love for. If you didn't love a project that's terrifying you, you wouldn't feel anything at all.
My head is full of doubts. When it's time to step on the wire, I don't know if I'll be able to take my first step.
Your heart will tell you what to do.
The more resistance you feel towards a project, the more fulfilled you will be when you finish it. Resistance always points us to our true north. So how do we consistently beat resistance? As Steven Pressfield says, by turning pro. As he describes turning pro, it has nothing to do with making or not making money out of your creative work. It is in fact a philosophy of work, an ideology of ethics on how you conduct your creative projects. You can turn professional one day and be an amateur again the next.
In short, I was back.
Yes, there is something I want to ask you. All right. How the fuck do you write so many books so fast? I think, I've had a really good 6 months. I've written 3 chapters, and you've finished 3 books in that time.
The way that I work, I try to get out there and I try to get 6 pages a day. So with a book like End of Watch, and when I'm working, I work every day, 3-4 hours, and I try to get those 6 pages, and I try to get them fairly clean.
And you do hit 6 pages a day?
I usually do.
Now that is an example of a pro. As Pressfield states, the professional knows that the mundane physical act of sitting down and starting to work sets in motion a mysterious process that produces inspiration. The amateur waits for inspiration, the professional knows that it will come after he starts. Now, as you see, turning pro has little to do with talent. George R.R. Martin is one of the most gifted authors of a generation, but he hasn't turned pro, which is why I am still waiting for his next book. The professional therefore acts in the face of fear. When the amateur fears a big creative endeavor, he waits for the fear to disappear. The professional knows this will never happen and starts anyway. An amateur dreams of stardom and glory. The professional has no use for this. He knows that success is merely a byproduct of work. He does the work and lets the rewards come or not come as they may. By doing this, the pro avoids disappointment, an ally of resistance that it will use to make us give up. The professional lets go of his ego. He doesn't take failure or success personally. Fear of rejection is human and lies deep in everyone. Resistance knows this and uses it to paralyze us and prevent us from doing our work. Pressfield states that this is one of the hardest aspects of turning pro. The professional puts his heart and soul into his work, then he steps back and assesses it hardly and coldly. He takes notes where he can do better his next project and then he moves on. The professional thus accepts criticism but never takes it personally. He knows resistance will use rejection to break him. Therefore, the professional endures adversity. When he's face down in the arena chewing on sand and everyone is laughing at him, he knows it is still better to be in the arena than standing on the sideline. Lastly, where the amateur might make romantic claims about doing it for the love, about not caring or being even proud of not making money, the professional recognizes that too much love will freeze him. Playing for money is the device he uses to adopt a working man mentality. As Pressfield states, the muse of inspiration loves a blue-collar work ethic, she loves the working stiff and hates prima donnas. The pro takes money to turn his love into his job. Technically he plays for pay, but in the end he does it for the love of the game. At this point you might be thinking, what a cold and heartless way to look at creative work. Where's the romance? Where's the mythology? Where's the beauty and mystery of art? These are things that we aim for when we turn pro, because we know when we beat resistance and sit down to do our work, something magical happens. When we sit down and grind it out, inspiration strikes, words start to flow effortlessly. Call it a flow state, call it being in the zone, or as Pressfield does, call it a muse. Where resistance resides in hell, creation has a seat in heaven. Here the muse looks down and admires your grind, your professionalism. When you present yourself to her with an attitude of egolessness and service, she will come down and sit on your shoulder, a powerful ally to help you in your endeavor. When we beat resistance and start, the muse will guide us, battling the dark force of resistance beside us until we finish our project. It is only at this moment, when you type that last word, when you play that last note, when you dance that last step, that you can look resistance in the eye and say, rest in peace, motherfucker. After which you will start a new project and the battle starts anew.